Hey, Billy from Perma Pastures Farm, and this is part 2 in doing Jeff Lawton's chicken tractor on steroids with meat birds. Now remember, I just want to say this again, this is experimental. It's never been done before, and whether or not it works, we're about to find out. So far it's looking favorable, but right now is a critical part in this whole process. Let's talk about where we were and where we are. Okay, we set this cage up last week. Now, we made some fundamental errors, and from the very beginning, we kind of suspected there would be. Now, those errors being, these holes on this, we've taken welded wire fence and we cut it in half and we made it about 16 inches high. And if you go back and look, to get the amount of material that we need within this cage to make an adequate compost pile, we need about a cubic yard. Now, that means based on the math we've done and based on the size of this, it has to be at least a foot high, which we achieved, and we had to add a little more material. So now we're to the point where we said, okay, where were the errors in this? Okay, one of which, because remember, these are meat birds, these are not layers, so they don't have these same physical capabilities in getting in and out of this thing that regular birds would. So we added a few more planks, this one and the one behind me that maybe you might not be able to see right now. Whereas regular layers would be able to fly up into this thing even if it were a meter high and you added a plank. We had to make adjustments because these birds are considerably larger, and ultimately they'll get to the point where they're not so adept with their wings. So that's one change we made, is adding these to it. Now, in the next cage, which is to my right, we've added, in addition to this, to keep them from being to take the material out and spreading it all over the ground where a fair amount of it is, we've added 1-inch hardware cloth. In fact, it was what was left over when we built that chicken tractor right there, that Justin Rhodes inspired chicken tractor. So we've taken that hardware cloth, we've taken another piece of this and added it to the outside. So that's going to keep them from scratching the material, kicking it all over the place. But here's where it's most critical. Today, we are going, it's a week later, and this is why I said this video is going to have to unfold over a few weeks. There's no way you're going to do this all in one video. So here's where it's critical. Okay, a week has passed. They've worked on this for a week. Every day we fed them here for a week. Now, we've given them not only the same food scraps that we give our pigs, in addition to that, we've given them, I'd say, 20% of what they ate per day, maybe up to 40 on some days. They were given their regular store-bought feed. Now, that's going to end. Now, this is the most critical part, because this is where we find out whether or not these birds were meant for this system, because we're going to take away their food completely at this point, their store-bought food, where the rations, everything is all laid out for the amount of protein that these birds need. Now, what's going to happen? We're going to flip this pile, and these birds are going to now be expected, because largely what we're giving them is carbohydrates. There's some protein in there, but largely carbohydrates. They're now going to be expected to source their own protein through micro and macronutrients that are what's left in this pile, and as they scratch through it. Now, we're going to find out in short order whether or not that works and whether or not they do it. Now, these birds, unlike a Cornish cross, are more adapted, supposedly, to be able to go out there and source their own food. We'll find out whether or not they're made for this. This is why this week is so critical. So the chicken tractor has moved down, let's say roughly 2 lengths of a chicken tractor. This pile is going to turn over here, and we're going to build a brand new pile right there. So with that said, it's time to get to work. Okay, the new compost cage is assembled, and we've done things just a little bit different, but folks, you got options in this system. So we put down the bedding. We're getting to the bottom of the bedding that we had up there in the barn. We put it down first. Most of it is brown material. There's some manure in there. And then we've taken, because we're in a more isolated area that didn't often get hit, so we ran the weed eater through and took some green material, threw it on top, and then we ended it with more of the brown material on top. Now, here's what's going to happen. We're going to take their food. Now, this is the very last of the store-bought feed that they have. So we need to use it up. Otherwise, I wouldn't be using it right now. We're going to dump that in here. We're going to take some food scraps. We're also going to dump it in here. Now, these guys right now get fed twice a day. In later videos, I'll explain why that's important, or at least why I think it's important. So we're going to get them out, let them eat. Then we're going to turn this compost pile from the previous week. Now, let me back up and state one other thing. That we source, if you wanted to do this system, and let's say you were unable to source any scrap food or anything like that, there is absolutely, positively no reason you couldn't do the very same thing with their regular store-bought food. Now, I would highly recommend that you ferment it first, because those crumbles that you buy there, they're just going to fall through this material, and you're going to lose a fair amount of it. But if you ferment it first, you're not going to lose really much at all. These guys will find it in the course of a day of 1 bucket of food scraps, and that's really all they'll need, and they'll be highly productive. Now, that's my own numbers, and that's roughly with about 30 birds. Now, we have 40 birds in here right now, so they're going to get a tad bit more than that, and also they have a higher energy requirement, and they're expected to put on weight. So in this particular system, in just food scraps, I'll give them about 1.5 buckets from now until the time it ends. But like I said, we're still in the experimental phase, and we're going to find out whether or not this system works. So with that said, it's time to feed them. Okay, so chickens are out, they're happy. What's going to happen also with their bedding on the inside, we'll let them eat for a while, but we'll take the bedding on the inside. It's sitting on a tarp. We're going to pick it up and we're going to dump it into that compost cage that we just assembled. So that's the next thing that'll happen, but not before we go ahead and flip this. Now, let me tell you what's theoretically supposed to happen, because this is all experimental at this point. We're going to take this compost, or the beginning of a compost cage, we're going to disassemble it, and we're going to flip it, and we're going to reassemble it right here. And we're going to add water part of the way too. Now, if these guys are meant for this system, they're going to recognize that they got a smorgasbord of protein over here in the form of micro and macro nutrients. They're going to go through here, they're going to source this out, they're going to scratch it out, they're going to poop on it. They're going to be feeding themselves protein, finding what little carbs that are still left in here, and they're also going to be scratching this out, making compost for us. This is theoretical at this point. So with that said, it's time to go ahead and make this happy, make them happy and make us happy by flipping this thing while these guys are occupied in their new cage. All right, a couple of things here. Every time you flip these piles, because they are not an 18-day compost, it's going to require some water, and a lot of it too. Now, you'll see Michelle here using a bucket because I don't have water in place down here. Now, that's a project that, Lord willing, will unfold here in the next few weeks. So in this particular pile, we used about 35 gallons of water. It's not ideal. It works better when you have a hose and some means to spray it out there. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. Also, we added a little bit of biochar to this. Okay, so we took their bedding and we put it into the new compost cage. Now, ideally, you want to do that before everything else. But through experience, I've learned that it works just as well if you do it afterwards. Let them eat, go back in, take their bedding from the inside, which we had a tarp laid down in there, worked beautifully, dump it on top. Now, by all indications, these guys are going to take to this system. I mean, at first, over a couple of days, they're going to say, it tastes great, but less filling. And they will work their way into it. But like I said, in the past, I've taken them cold turkey from feed to this. This time we've eased them into it because, like I said, these are meat birds. So at this point, we're going to wait another week. They're going to they're going to work this down. They're going to get their protein out of it. They're going to get the carbs out of the one we provide. Now, does it seem like a lot of work? Yeah, just like anything else that requires more. It's funny because I'm looking at what this guy's about to eat and he's after it. So like everything else, if you want to get these things for low cost, if you want to produce your meat for free, hey, I'm giving you solutions, but they're going to require something out of you. So this is much more labor intense than any other meat bird system out there. So with that said, we're going to wait a week. They're going to work this down. They're going to work on the other pile. We'll keep adding material to the other one every single day. So with that said, until a week from now when we give you the next update and show you the next part in this process, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy from Perma Pastures Farm, where pimp means permaculture is my passion. We'll see you next time.